Yeah.
And that's fine. Okay, I hope I'm clear on that.
That sounds great. No, I'm looking forward to it.
And action. How is Simon Harris?
Gee, I thought you were serious.
I won't do my Simon Harris impression.
I must say, this is a wonderful... The debate is currently on.
Yeah.
And so I told my special advisor that I was doing this, and her partner works for Simon Harris. And he's like, what do you mean you're not watching the debate? I was like, watch the debate. You know Moneyball?
Yeah.
You know Billy Bean doesn't watch the matches?
Yeah, he walks out in his car.
No way I could watch this debate.
Click us in again.
Remember, I'm the tired
I hope it won't be that bad for the entire thing.
Don't be daft.
Well, I'm here and I'm delighted to have the Minister of State for Finance, Neale Richmond, in with me. TD, how are you?
Pretty good, yeah. And down to the business end of a general election campaign. Luckily, this isn't my first general election campaign. It's not my first election campaign as a candidate or a staffer. So I know what this part of the campaign feels like, and it's pretty rough physically. And I will probably be a nervous wreck in about 48 hours' time.
For somebody who's been through a few of these and you got experience from them, how does this one feel versus the previous one? Is there a different sense of what's happening out there?
It's in many ways a lot more enjoyable. I must say, I'm quite taken by the positivity on the doors. I'm not trying to tell people who I am. They generally know who I am, and they either like me or they don't. That's fine. Physically, it's a bit tougher. I'm 5 years older, and you do notice those little aches and pains and all that. Like, just for context, we'll be clocking 25 to 27,000 steps a day.
Yeah, you look pretty fit.
Yeah, no, which is good. And you're out in the elements all day.
Yeah.
It's pretty cold out there. We're all giving out about chap lips and windburn and things like that. But no, like the good thing of having done this before is I know how I should feel. And if we had done this 2 days ago and I came in and said I'm exhausted, I would have been worried. Because you need to be able to know what's coming. We do train for this physically and mentally and emotionally. We prepare really, really hard. And when I say we, I mean all politicians from all parties and none. Candidates and people around us know what this entails if they've done it before. And if you're someone who hasn't done it before, it's all a matter of first, and it's a lot of shock. But this campaign has been good. And one thing that's really struck me, Greg, is people are very pleasant at the doors. I think there's been a lot of thought over the last number of years that it's all about hate. It's all about the online bile, and we see horrendous protests around the country, and we see awful things like colleagues of mine, government ministers, TDs, having people protest outside their home, viable death threats, all these sort of things. All cabinet ministers in Ireland now have armed security with them. That used to be the way. But the reaction to that is the amount of people who've thanked me for calling to their door and thanked me for running. They mightn't be voting for me. They mightn't like me at all.
They appreciate you coming to the door and saying hello.
There is appreciation for people who are, of all parties and none, who are prepared to put themselves out. And I must say this from the get-go, because it's not said enough, and politicians can be painted, particularly in this gotcha era that we see in the UK and the US. I have a personal belief that all politicians are trying to do the same thing. We're trying to help people, simple as. We're just trying to do it in different ways.
It is a hard time to be involved in politics, though. There's so much more that you're dealing with that just wasn't there 20, 30, 40 years ago. It's in a completely different world. And I'm really looking forward to hearing about your campaign. I'm looking forward to hearing about your passions and what you love about politics and what you really want to bring to the Irish people. I think we'll start by going right back to you as a young child. What was life like for you growing up?
Yeah, I was really lucky, and I know I'm lucky. And perhaps at the time I didn't, but grew up in Ballantyre, Marley Grange, right opposite the park. I was the youngest of four. Mum and dad, mum was from Cavan, dad was from Wicklow, very typical. Moved up to Dublin in the late 60s for work.
Were they political?
Not at all. When I say sorry, they were political. They voted, they read the papers, we discussed the issues at the dinner table, but they weren't active in the party, or I didn't know they were active in the party. It turns out my late mother was active in Fine Gael in the 80s when I was a toddler. Okay. I never knew that.
And what did they do for professions?
So my dad was a sales rep. He was on the road, builder suppliers, roofing company based out of Kildare. They had an office in town. So he was an old school rep, sales manager. Mum initially was in the bank, but different time. She got married in 1971 and she got sacked. It was a marriage bar. And then she had my brother in 73. She had moved to a different bank. She got sacked. So she.
Sorry, they brought in a marriage bar, which meant that if you're married, you weren't able to work.
That was Ireland up until 1976.
Can you imagine if they brought that in today? Jesus.
A company or the civil service, if you got married, they could just terminate your contract. Same way if you had kids. That was women's lot in Ireland until 1976.
It's amazing.
Absolutely backward. So she largely stayed at home with us, 4 kids. You know, there's a lot of running. And then she kind of steadily went back to work as my siblings had left school at this stage, so she went back working. She did a back to work course at Foss and ended up working for Trócaire for the last 15 years of her life. And that was fairly steady, stable.
And your mum has passed?
Both my mum and dad sadly passed away quite young. My dad passed away 19 years ago. Okay. He was 59, he had pancreatic cancer.
So you were just early 20s. You're 41 now, right?
Yeah, 41. Okay. So I was 22, last couple of weeks in college, unfortunately. And then mum passed away 4 years later. She had breast cancer. So, yeah, got the full gambit. Pretty lousy. But I'm aware that I wasn't really, really young to make it really tragic to lose a parent. But also I feel a little bit cheated that I missed out for having my parents through my 20s. Didn't have them at my wedding. They never met my kids. Didn't meet any of their grandkids. My mum met a couple of them all right. But that was unfortunately the hand that the fates dealt us.
You went to Wesley College and you went on from there. You've already alluded to it. You finished your degree, and what did you choose to study?
So I did my undergrad in history, which is where my interest in politics came. I love history. My brother has a history degree, my sister has a history degree, my brother teaches history. So I was the slightly kind of secret nerdy kid and who loved getting World War II magazines, watching history documentaries at home on video, because that's what it was. So I did a history undergrad in UCD, and then it was when I was in university that I decided to get party political. I decided to join a party, and politics is it's addictive. It's being part of a political party or a political movement or campaign. It's like supporting a Premiership football team. You follow opinion polls like you follow results, and elections are your cup final. So I got involved in a party in the party in 2002, and then I decided I like this so much I'll do a master's in politics.
When did you have an idea? Do you know what? I think I want to be a politician. Were you quite young at the time?
I never thought I wanted to be a politician, but I remember, 99, what was it? No, before that, I remember there was a local elections in 91, maybe a little later. Yeah, general election 97, I would have been 14. And my sister still slagged me. You collected all the leaflets and used to lay them out in your bedroom like someone would lay out. I had my Premiership football stickers on one side, and then I had my election leaflets.
And what was the attraction to the election for you?
It's the campaigning, it's the colours, it's the fact that you're reading on a leaflet, someone who you don't know is prepared to tell you who they are, where they're from, what they believe in, everything from the colours and the branding to the message.
But what would have grabbed your attention? So when you're looking at all of these leaflets, who were the individuals, or what did they stand for that you were like, geez, he's impressive or she's impressive? What quality did they have?
Well, I was a kid, so it wasn't that I was impressed, but it was like what they were saying. You can sometimes, when you're reading an election leaflet or you're listening to a politician, and people will be very cynical about politicians, but you can tell if they really mean it. If someone's talking really passionately about anything, it could be disability services, obviously, that's one that drives so many people into politics, and rightly so, and into advocacy. It could be the situation in a foreign country, like talking 97, there was the wars in Yugoslavia had just stopped, communism had collapsed, all this. You can tell when someone's being sincere about someone. If someone tells you, I'm really passionate about education or sport, that's what I would look at. What are they talking about? What's the generic stuff that you can copy and paste and put in any leaflet, and any party can be talking about it? That's just sort of how it started. And then I remember watching, it was Tony Blair in 97, the New Labour.
Tony Blair is very underrated.
Yeah.
He talked recently, actually about 18 months ago in Cabinet, and I just thought he was still so articulate. He's a very good turn of phrase. He brings us across around lots of clarity. And for me, again, I'm impartial here. I had a great chat with Nick Delahanty, an independent. I mean, really, really interesting, fascinating guy, smart guy, full of gumption, full of ambition, really interesting chat. And we're talking about leadership and people that you looked at and you looked up to. And had his set way that he felt he was a leader, and how he went about setting up his business and people he looked up to. I think I have to ask you the same question. What sort of a leader would you be?
I don't know if I'm necessarily a leader, but like for me, it's all about, you want everyone who's part of your campaign or part of your office or part of your team or part of your local branch to feel that they're as important as the next person, to bring them along, to have that minute or two to actually ask them, you know, what are you studying in college? Could be some young person who's come along. What are you studying? What are you hoping to do? Could be an older person. What did you work at?
So engagement would be pretty big for you.
Engagement, but you need to know the people around you, and you need to want to know. You need to care about the people around you. If you're going to ask someone, like I have friends at the moment in the general election campaign who are taking annual leave from work. Like they're taking
tough, yeah.
They're taking annual leave from work to come out and give up their day out in the elements. And it's my job that's on the line. I know it's my job on the line. It's quite clear what my vested interest in the election campaign is. First and foremost, this is what will pay my mortgage next week. This is what put food on my family's table. It's not why I do it. It's not the motivating factor. But if you want to be base level, that's very obvious. But yet I have people that they will take 2 or 3 days more off work this week to come out and campaign for me. And then they'll spend all day Saturday happily at home with the TV on, the laptop open, the radio on, following election results around the country with the popcorn and whatever else out. Because it's a very... in Irish politics in particular, it's quite intoxicating. Like it can really get in on you. You know, you give up your 2 or 3 weeks of a campaign, you give it your all. And certainly I think when you have people who are prepared to do that for you, you need to give them a lot more than the time of the day. And I've been involved in campaigns. And you can see it with a bad candidate, you can see it with a bad campaign manager when they snap at someone. I was like, what on earth are you doing snapping at someone who's volunteering their time for you? If you're annoyed with yourself, you got to take yourself away and have a moment with yourself. And that's where the leadership is. It's very hard to say I'm the leader or I'm the candidate here, follow me. You got to bring them along with you.
On the current campaign trail, firstly, how many people are on your team?
I have a WhatsApp group of about 250 people.
Wow, that's a lot of people.
It is, and it is inflated because some people are in the WhatsApp group who don't have the ability to get out on the doors, maybe a bit more elderly.
Do you know how many houses you've knocked on? How many doors you've knocked on, roughly?
Yeah, we were working out in the car today. By tomorrow's our last day, probably of just pure knocking on doors. We'll probably have hit somewhere in the region of 36,000 over the last 3 weeks.
Okay.
So we did 1,350 today.
And if you're to look at the information that you've gathered, like it's all great to be personable, which you are. I think it's a very important trait that you need to have is show respect for people and engage in good conversation. Whether somebody's has a different opinion than you, that's fine. Let's debate about it. Let's have a chat about it. I mean, you know, that's what politics is. But what would be the main 3 issues that you're seeing on the door that people are, even though you might be very pleasant and they might be very pleasant, they'll still probably say, do you know what, this is really doing my head in.
Yeah.
What are the 3 things that you're seeing most often that the Irish people are looking as the main issues they see?
Like there's no surprise here. Like it's not manufactured housing is the biggest issue. And it manifests itself in lots of different ways. But the one I get a lot is the frustrated parent. You know, my kids are in Sydney. My son is living in the box room. My child is renting up the road and they don't see the prospect of owning a own home. And it goes back to kind of our earlier reference to parents. They're more frustrated than their child is because they want for their child what they wanted and they're right to want that. And so housing will come up the most and in lots of different ways. And then you have the person themselves going like, I'm stuck with my parents. I want to be out on my own. Or you have people who are just going like, it just feels so expensive. That's the biggest issue. And then there's a bit of a fall off and there's a couple of bunched issues that are, some of them are related, some of them are unrelated, some of them are just, and you can tell when someone is just something that they heard in the news or they read in a newspaper or it's an issue that a pundit has told them that's an issue. It's very easy to manifest that, but certainly, look, it's the nature, it's the issues people bring up with you are issues that they see in yourself. So in the last general election, I was the chair of the Brexit committee. And people would have known me from going on late night British television generally to talk about Brexit. So of course they wanted to talk about Brexit with me. It was still a live issue. Boris Johnson had just become Prime Minister of the UK. They'd just had a general election before. big mandate, Brexit or bust. You're the guy who talks about telly on the radio or on the TV. I want to talk about you. It wasn't the biggest issue of the campaign, despite what we tried to do in government. But I'm the party's childcare spokesperson at the moment. And you go to a door and you can see the buggy behind the door, or you can see someone has a child in their arm, or look, they're frantically, you can hear the shouts. We all know what a busy, happy house sounds like. And they go like, oh, they want to talk to you about childcare, because then you lead, well, I've got kids, my wife works in early years education, and by the way, I'm the party's spokesperson in childcare, and I've been on the media a little bit about it, and I have something to say about it. So it's not like that's necessarily, it is a big issue, I've no doubt about it, but certain issues get drawn to you as a candidate if you're associated with them. So if I was Pascal Donoghue from my party, for example, if he knocked on the door, someone would definitely want to talk to him about the economy. People would want to talk to Stephen Donnelly, the health minister, about their local hospital or GP services. And it's the same for what subject you're associated with. But housing would definitely be top of the list. So after that, I'd say childcare / education, as in we can't get a place in a secondary school for my child, or we're on a waiting list, or it is pressurised, because my part of the world where I'm a TD for, we've had loads of homes built in the last 5 years, more than most other parts of the country. But the more homes you have, the more families you have living there, the more pressure there is on services.
Yeah.
So there's waiting lists for secondary schools, primary schools, childcare. That would be the second one.
It is something that comes up a lot, and again, from talking to other people about this, people are really intent that this is a massive issue that we have to find a way of resolving. So before we can look to resolving the issue, where are we? Like, why has there been such a terrible situation that has developed to the point where we are today? Like, let's imagine we're just chatting here without being a politician. How come we're in the situation?
Well, there's a couple of things. One, like, we have to acknowledge that this isn't unique to Ireland. Housing crisis in Australia.
But relating to Ireland. I understand it's happening in other parts of the world.
That goes to the source. The same reason that housing is an issue in Australia, Canada, the US, the UK, is the same reason it's largely an issue in Ireland. Ultimately, we had a massive financial crash. We were hugely exposed to it. We didn't build homes for very long. So we're now we're playing catch up. For the last decade or so, we've been playing catch up in housing. We remember what the crash was like, 125% mortgages. It went wallop. We had no homes being built, but the population still grew. People still needed homes.
Yeah.
It was artificially masked because there was real mass immigration back in the late noughties. You had ghost estates, not finished, lying idle. No ghost estates left now. They've been finished off. There wasn't developers to build. So then you're playing catch up. So we were broke. We had no homes to build. So since then, we've been playing catch up, I'd say, for the last 7 or 8 years. Then you throw in mitigating factors, a slow planning system, a lack of builders in the state because they'd emigrated because there was a building crash.
So there's 35,000 permits, is that right, that are waiting to be cleared for building?
We kind of deal with completions and commencements. That's how we measure housing. So last year there was about 32,500 homes completed, new homes built. At the moment this year there's 50,000, there'll be 40,000 homes completed this year, but there's 50,000 active commencements. So
and how many are in the planning stage that haven't yet been passed to be complete?
Like there's tens of thousands of houses that have planning permission, but they just haven't been built. And there's lots of reasons that you have to have the builders to build them. You have to have the developers to fund it. The state is a developer. The Land Development Agency builds housing. But it gets back to, we were playing catch up. There was a deficit of housing. You need to build X amount of homes every year anyway, just to meet, to keep track of a growing population. People are living longer. The family dynamic is totally different now than 25 years ago. Between, 30 years ago, divorce wasn't legal. Families, and that leads into it. And this isn't an excuse for this is just a context.
No, it's all good.
And then it's looking at Ireland's situation was, we stopped building houses, we're playing catch up. Then we were slow to build houses, and it took a while to actually find the formula where it was worth a developer's while building houses, and the state had the resources to build houses.
But am I not right in saying that Michael Noonan around 2011, when we were on our back as a country, that he essentially put it to tenant like the ability for foreign companies, Canadian American banks, to come in and essentially buy distressed mortgages, distressed assets, as a way of creating what has been referred to as vulture funds. And you know, and
Yeah.
I think the question for you is, so in 2011, 2013, it was very valuable. I think the country needed it. There was a situation that Nick actually alluded to on Sunday, which I found interesting, about an estate that was built in 2015 in Mullingar. I believe he says somewhere in the region of maybe 260 homes. And when you had their viewing day, people came and they'd already all been bought up by, for example, one of these vulture companies, as they're called.
Yeah.
So the question to you is, and it's a hard one, you're now in a situation where what was very, I suppose, relevant for the time, times have changed. And again, the term mission creep has been put out there. And to this day now, where things possibly should have changed from a tax perspective, we're still nearly being paid, we're hostage here because we've got companies that are coming in and essentially drying up and controlling the market that's led into asylum-seeking accommodation.
Yeah, but like I think it's like there's a lot thrown into there in one topic. Like,
Excuse me, I'm
like
just keen on your
funds
view
were
on it.
brought in, funds were allowed in 2011, quite simply because we'd no one else to build property. Like there was no one to build property, there was no one to service property, and they built or bought assets that no one was able to finish, no one was able to do the second fix, and they built to rent, and they rented them out, and they weren't bad landlords, it just meant people couldn't own them. That went on for way too long. Accept that, no problem to acknowledge that. It doesn't happen now. Like if you want to buy more than 10 homes, you're going to pay a massive amount of stamp duty. We increased it again in the budget.
So you're doing that to mitigate them having the stronghold over the market?
Yeah.
And is that working?
Yeah, I think there's something like 46 homes bought by large-scale investment funds in the last year. Like it's dried up.
And would you, as a Minister of Finance, are you in those negotiations? And it's quite interesting, I'd say.
Yeah, like developing budgetary policy, getting anything done in government, there's lots of different ways of doing it. Like you look at how government is, and you look at, okay, there's 3 political parties in government, and you look at the layers. You have your 15 senior cabinet ministers, you have your 20 or so ministers of state, which I am one of, and then you have the rest of your dole, backbench TDs, senators, opposition TDs, senators. We also have the permanent government, and the permanent government are always there, and they are, and I'm not going to bash civil servants, the exact opposite. These are some of the most brilliant minds in the country, completely dedicated to their country. But there's your Secretary General, your Assistant Secretary General. And you look at a policy now, the policy is we want to get as many people as possible to own their own home. And that's why the activity of funds in the market is nothing today compared to what it was a decade ago. I would argue it was pretty necessary a decade ago, to be honest. Otherwise, we wouldn't have had any homes coming into the market at all. And it was
But have they allowed, I suppose, that vulture fund to kind of merge into occupying, for example, IPAS centres?
IPAS
Like
centres
City West is the one that was mentioned to me, and I found it really interesting. And again, the great thing about being impartial is, you know, we can knock off each other and have a good chat.
Totally.
So the fact that probably the biggest IPAS centre, which is in City West, was bought by one of these vulture companies who's paying a similar tax and getting the tax breaks they would have got back in 2011. Is that miles off? Or
Yeah, no, that's not accurate.
Okay.
To be honest, I think that's veering into slight conspiracy theories.
Okay,
To be quite
okay.
frank, just to call it straight out.
Yeah.
It wasn't bought by a fund.
Okay.
Ultimately, the people who run City West, we'd shut down the economy.
Okay.
What was City West used for? It was used for COVID hospitals. It was used for a vaccination centre. It is a large scale. It was where all the parties had their political conferences up until COVID, to be honest. There's very few conferencing facilities like that in Ireland. And then ultimately, we came out of COVID and we had waves and waves of Ukrainian refugees fleeing a vicious war just as COVID was ending. And we needed a rapid response to how we could accommodate people. And ultimately, there were hotels around the country. This was kind of February, March time. Don't have much business. We were fairly crippled by COVID, but we have the opportunity to redesign our hotel or our conference centre into what has now become an IPAS centre or a Ukrainian centre. And yeah, they are making money out of this, don't get me wrong, but it was an emergency situation to a war the likes of an emergency response to a war the likes of which Europe hasn't seen in decades. I wouldn't equate it with vulture funds coming into the housing market. I think that's a crass equivalent. That's just not factually
No, it's
correct.
good. That's why you ask these questions.
Yeah,
you
no,
know,
and
it's
like
important that
I
you can
wouldn't
answer
have,
them. You know.
I wouldn't. I'm not. I think it's important to argue the toss about these things as well.
Love it.
You know, we overplay the role of funds. You can call them cookie, you can call them vulture, you can give them whatever name. Ultimately, they're institutional investors. Institutional investors could be anyone's pension. You know, if you have a private pension, it's being invested in an institution, and they generally invest in property. There's plenty of Irish funds, pension funds or otherwise, who've invested in commercial property and residential property here in Ireland and across. That's what they are. You can castigate them and say they're the enemy to our housing crisis, or you can say that they're actually just a functioning part of any economy. But yeah, we were overly reliant on them at one stage, but we're nowhere near. Like, there's really no.
So it's slowed down.
To a trickle. It's been down to a total trickle. That when you see accommodation, the likes of, you'll hear the odd story of a Google or a Ryanair will buy up a quantity of apartments or homes for their staff. But look, Bourneville, where Cadbury's is from, that was originally a town built by Cadbury's to house their workers. So that's not a new phenomenon. And you can argue the toss whether that's right or wrong. But ultimately, at the moment now, the vast majority of homes being built now are built to buy, built to purchase. They're either built by the state to use as social housing or approved housing body housing, or the relatively new, there's not too many of them, there should be more affordable and cost rental schemes. But the idea of a developer, that whole build to rent phenomenon is also slowing down because we've made legislative changes to make it more difficult.
Yeah. In the funding package that was worth 8.3 billion, you very openly talked about the need for now, also the need for building for the future. In terms of building homes that would be affordable, you know, and social housing, do you have a forecast idea of how much we built per year for the next 5 years?
Yeah, the aim is, so this is the Fine Gael plan. I can only speak for Fine Gael because we're mid in an election, but the parties have differences on numbers, but look, we can argue why. So our forecast is to build 303,000 homes over the next 5 years. Of those, every year we'll build 12,000 social and 12,000 affordable as a minimum. That's what we need. So you're looking at, on those numbers, roughly 50% of homes built every year for the next 5 years will be social or affordable. And then like, what's affordable to one person is very different to what's affordable for another person. But you roughly put the average for an affordable home is about €270,000. And also then what's a home? That also includes apartments. Should do. Lots of people have apartments.
Yeah, like there's so many apartment blocks, and you walk through town that are just so dated, and they can be sometimes on pretty big patches of land, but like the unit's quite small. I ask this question a lot, probably because I'm a geography teacher, that Ireland, in terms of the tectonic plates, are in one of the most neutral places in the world. We're nowhere near a plate boundary.
Yeah.
The nearest plate boundary from us is where you have the North American plate and the Eurasian plate diverging. Great.
I remember the diagrams.
All that fine stuff. Yeah, I never understand why, when we don't get extreme weather, why we don't decide to build high. Like, why is our tallest building, compared to CBDs all over the world, why don't we house so much more people that are working in Dublin, and go as high as we want, because we're not going to have any tectonic activity and no earthquakes? Why don't we do that?
Loads of reasons, and they're all a nonsense for a start. I think at one stage the highest building in Dublin was Liberty Hall, 17 stories.
It's 22 stories, I believe, in Dublin.
Yeah,
I thought it was 42, I believe it's 22.
I think it's 22, yeah. I think it's either HSBC or one of those large banks has come over. And I must say, and I'll declare this, I love skyscrapers. I think, I remember getting a boat tour in Chicago, going down the river and looking at all these amazing buildings, being in Tokyo in 2019, and being in the middle of Tokyo, and you're just up on the 17th
It's
story.
amazing.
It's
like,
amazing.
I always think about New York. Let's imagine that New York were like, we're pretty happy with 22 stories. That's the way we're going to do it, and we're going to build out. I mean, you're going to have a massive issue. You're not even going to have like any land for a kid to play on.
And this is one of the biggest issues. If we go back to the Celtic Tiger, and again, a phrase I learnt in Leaving Cert Geography was urban sprawl and the curse of urban
Yeah.
sprawl.
Yeah.
And I think it was a parody in the Russell Carroll Kelly books about his buddies selling houses in, I don't know, like Ballahadreen, Gateway to Dublin. Like, ultimately, we have an aversion to height in Dublin city centre that's been there for decades. Now, a lot of that will go back in time to when we just simply didn't have the money to do this. We were
What time are you talking about here now?
70s, 80s.
Okay.
We were a broke, like,
Yeah.
the first 50, 60 years of independence, we were a broke state. I think we have to accept that we were. My uncle's just arrived in from England. He left Ireland in the 60s, and he said he left a third world country. And I think that's pretty jarring. And he moved, and he didn't come back. But at that time, other countries were building skyscrapers, of course, but we didn't have the money or the wherewithal to realise that if we actually genuinely built at height and density within the canals, instead, Ranelagh was the first suburb, and then Mount Merion became a suburb, and then Dundrum became a suburb, and now I live in Stepaside, which isn't even a suburb. People are commuting in from Ashford, so you're talking at least on a good day an hour into town with no traffic, but a lot more.
I know that feeling.
train.
You know,
Yeah.
like I'd have a big commute now. But what's the answer? Is there any way you can change that?
Yeah, and we're starting to change it. Now, planning regulations have changed that we can actually go over 17 stories in Dublin city centre.
But can you not go in there, say, as being a pretty hefty player in the political world, can a group of you lads not get together and say, look, let's just look at this. Why don't we just go up and just make a decision to build high so you can have a really effective central business district where, again, young professionals can live there, and it'll be, because the simple economics is, it's all about demand and supply. So if you have more supply, well, then it's going to fit the model, no?
High and dense. That's what's needed in a modern city centre, and it is changing. It is actually moving that way. So if you go down to Grand Canal or anywhere around the Quays, and you see the amount of building around the Point, or the Three Arena. The Point is in old money as we would have known it. That's where you see genuinely larger, office buildings, apartment buildings, where there was old warehouses, now they're going up. The big one then is the Poolbeg Peninsula. That's where you have 3,500 homes, predominantly affordable and social homes. They're about to go to market any day now.
But they still could be, like, if you take the apartments around Three Arena, they could be 3 times higher.
They could be. Now, be very, and look, I think one of the developers, I think it was Johnny Ronan, had a proposal for a 47-storey tower.
Yeah, the towers, yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And like, it is something, I don't think it's certainly not a lack of financing ambition, but if you have all your buildings are averaging around 10 stories and you have a couple now going up to 20, which is great, it's going to be it's going to have to be done someone from the private sector. I don't know who's going to come along and say, all these 10, couple of 20-storey buildings going forward, I'm going to stick in a 47-storey building or a 110-storey. Now, that's exactly how it happened in the US.
Yeah, but if you take all around the globe at the moment, everybody's dealing with immigration issues. It's down to overpopulation. You have a certain size country, you have certain infrastructure, you have certain resources, and steadily when the population is continuing to rise, like it is, and we've got to call a spade, you get to the point where if you're talking about building over 300,000 homes, I mean,
the vast majority of them are going to
all
have
the
to
land,
be,
everything is going to become more populated, which means there's more strain on resources. Traffic's going to be worse. Yeah, it's a tough one, isn't it?
When you talk about overpopulation, obviously the population in the world is growing rapidly.
Yeah.
And it's growing rapidly because people are living longer, which is a good thing, obviously. But the population of Ireland, the entire island of Ireland, is still less than it was before the famine. So we're not overpopulated.
Yeah, but it's
we're
a
just not
different time with
accommodating
different
right.
needs. You could have 25 people living in a tiny place all
Exactly.
happy with a fire.
So
Now
different
everything is
time.
different. The world has changed.
The world has changed, and that's why we need to look at accommodation that changes. And one thing that's been quite transformative is there was the old Irish tradition. Again, it goes back to the famine of the need to own land. Everyone wanted their bit of back garden. And trust me, don't get me wrong, I don't begrudge anyone who wants a back garden, and I know during COVID we'd have been lost without mine, for example. But certainly, I look at Sandyford Business District, it's in the middle of my constituency. 6,000 people live there. Everyone just assumes it's all businesses. And the vast majority of them were people who weren't born in Ireland. They were born in loads of different countries. And I was speaking to a family at the Lewis stop in Sandyford the other morning, and it was a mum and a dad, and they were walking their 3 kids to school. And they said, "Oh, we live in the apartments." And I said, "Oh, how long have you been there?" "Oh, 12 years. And I said, "Oh, right, and are you looking?" I said, "No." Why wouldn't we want to live in a 3-bed apartment? Like,
Yeah.
they came from countries where that's where
Funnily,
they lived.
they're built so well as apartments that you can come down the very bottom of your apartment and you're in the gym. You've got Dunnes stores there. You have everything around you, and you have the Lewis near you. So then you've got a really good transport system that can take you into town. I mean, look, we could talk for hours, because what I would love is a transport system that goes straight from the airport, like a train straight into Dublin City, like all major countries. And it's one of those things, like, you know, I'm sure you get a lot of this from individuals, and you're probably like getting hit over the head with all these ideas. But the answer again is, how do you respond to people who have hopefully good points, good intellectual points? You know, like, do you agree with them? Are you able to tell them why you don't? Why don't we have a really good system going from, you know, the airport to Dublin City?
Like, well, if I agree with them, I have no problem telling someone I agree with them, but I've also no problem disagreeing with someone.
Yeah.
Like, the amount of people who will tell me in the doors will tell me we're building too many apartments. Nobody wants to live in apartments. And I go, like, that's not factually correct. We do need apartments. Sure, we need houses too, but we do need apartments. So I have no problem telling someone on the door saying, like, actually, we do need apartments. We need a lot more in the city centre between the canals. The metro to the airport, yeah, you try. Like, it's very difficult, because particularly that's obviously something I just blatantly agree with. But there are politicians who disagree with it. Now, they can explain their own reasons why they disagree with it, and that's fine. Congestion around Ranelagh or something daft like that. And then you try and provide the context, and, like, you have to explain, and obviously being a government minister, it's a bit different. I can't just go to the door, and if someone says, I'm really frustrated by X, I'll just say, I agree with you. Aren't they all terrible? Because, you know, you have to take responsibility.
No, you can't. Yeah, I agree.
And certainly people who haven't been in government will see, if they get into government, will realise that, oh, I can't just give out about something, you actually have to do something about it. And there are lots of reasons, and it's not unique to Ireland. I think that's the thing, like, we're a brilliant country, we're a great country, but we're not unique. There's lots of challenges that we face that other country faces. Try and talk to a British person about, is it HS2, the railway to Manchester, that's been shelved again, the additional runway for Heathrow, or whatever, it doesn't matter. I'm not trying to do down another country, I'm just saying there's always comparisons. But I think the metro is the maddening one, that it's been on the plans for well over a decade. Money's no excuse, loads of money. We have the money to build that. It would make absolute common sense.
So we have the money to build it.
It's not an issue with money. Getting a route. So when you're getting a route, particularly for a metro, and remember this is the exact same with the Lewis, the amount of people who were worried in Milltown or wherever, Broombridge, but I'm going to lose my back garden because you're going to run a tram line back down to it. Bear in mind, the Lewis goes back to the old school Harcourt Street tram that existed pre-independence. And I still have complaints. I'd regularly make the case that we need our Lewises to run later. If our Lewises actually ran to 3 a.m. like they do at Christmas, maybe people would be content. Actually, I will go into town and have a meal or a drink because I know I can get home in a safe, quick manner.
A tram from the airport doesn't have to stop anywhere. So, like, you know, like you do with the Port Tunnel, which is a massive advantage.
It still has to go through somewhere.
Yeah, but can you not go underneath the ground?
Again, you're the geography teacher, but going underground, it can happen, and there's plans for it to go underground. And
I didn't plan to ask you about this.
No, but like,
I don't know why I am, but
like this is,
I often think about it.
This is the sort of stuff that comes up in the door.
Okay.
When people go, like, people will say, like, oh, it seems like we don't get big projects done right in this country, and that's very topical, but we do get a lot of really good ones done right.
But obviously you took a bit of heat, let's be honest, like for the Children's Hospital, the expense of that. Obviously the bike shed, I mean,
like with the Children's Hospital, we take heat and we rightly take heat. At least we can claim ownership of the Children's Hospital. It's signed off by a government of the day. The government appoints a board of Children's Health Ireland or Children's Hospital Ireland to interact with the builders and either get money back or get guarantee. The bike shed is the most maddening one because we're the politicians who get all the slack for it.
Yeah.
But we had no say about it. We didn't sign off on it. No politician did. There was lots of discussions at a committee, but ultimately there was free rein for that. And the failing is on us. We have to defend it.
But is that not just like for you being somebody who's obviously passionate about the country, you care about the people, you want this country to do really well.
Yeah.
That's why you do so well. Like you're 100 to 1 on in your constituency.
Yeah, don't say
you
that
know,
too loud, yeah.
well, look, the good news is that people do like you. But at the same time, like, do you not just think, for somebody now who's been in the game, so am I right in saying it was Gay Mitchell
Yeah, I worked
that
for
brought
Gay
you
first.
in, European Union.
Yeah,
you're talking
I
about-
worked in Gay's office in Brussels.
So from that time until now, you've seen so many people come and go, so many policies come and go. You've gained this great experience. So now you look at something, you can make a really good calculated decision on
Yeah.
it. When something like that happens for you, that makes you look bad. That makes the government look bad.
It makes
Does that not
politics
just
look bad.
does that just like fucking piss you off?
Of course it does. Because you're kind of like, you go and like, you see the push notification, you go like, OPW spent $1.5 million on a security hut at the Department of Finance. And you go like, I look at that out of the window of my office. How on earth did it cost that much money? And I'm on the hook for that, even though I never knew anything about it. But you have to own
But
it.
do you not have anxiety? Like for me now, to think about, like Owen Murphy came out with his book.
Yeah.
You know,
I haven't read it yet, and I'm not going to read it until after.
yeah.
the
So
election.
essentially,
I have bought it, though.
it's called Running from Office.
Yeah.
And he talks about essentially the fact that he felt so trapped. He felt like he was getting abused all the time. He felt that there's this constant spotlight on him. There's a lot of toxicity. It was vicious. You're a family man. You know, you still play rugby at 41. You're around the community. For you, who's got a wife and kids, I mean, hearing some of the extracts from his book, I'm like, Jesus, that's pretty harsh to be a politician now.
Yeah, like Owen. Yeah, I feel bad. Like, again, I haven't read the book yet.
But for you, in terms of
Yeah.
you being in that space, Jesus, I don't know how you do it.
Like, I'm not in the space Owen was at. He was at a higher profile than I am. He had more responsibility, and he was in the white heat of it, and he became the complete subject of a lot of ire, unfairly. Owen was a good guy. Owen is a good guy. He's my pal. I really liked Owen.
Great fella, yeah.
And I feel a bit bad in hindsight that, like, we weren't best buddies, but we were on good terms. We went away on weekends together, we'd been on stag do's together. You know, like, you'd more than happy to remember him from college. He was in the drama society. And you'd kind of go, I never really at the time knew why he quit. We knew he was under pressure, but he kind of hid it all. And never, like, it was COVID, so it's not like you'd go for a beer or for a coffee. You know, we were sitting. COVID was horrible in hindsight. We'd sit in the convention centre, 160 of us TDs, and we'd be all like 5 metres apart. And you'd be shouting at a distance, and you'd be in there for votes, and like Owen would be like 6 rows in front of me, like you're in a cinema. And then you'd all leave, you'd put your masks on, and you'd go home. So you weren't really talking to anyone. So you didn't know at the time that he was staying with friends and he was going through so much. And he'd left cabinet at this stage. And like, I would have been, like, I remember, like, I used to hassle him when I was a senator to, oh, here, would you come to this event? Or would you speak at this for me? Or I didn't have an iota with the level of pressure, personal pressure he was on. And there's very few politicians. He would have taken a lot of it. Leo Varadkar would have been another one. Previously, you would have seen a lot with maybe Mary Harney, and she would have spoken about it, that she became a sort of a figure. And it's really unfair when you see we're going to just pick on them. And it was the real peak use of Twitter, or X as it is now, where it became a really mattered, and you were all consumed by this. We've kind of moved on a little bit by that. You can separate that the internet isn't the real world. But Owen used to get stick in hindsight. I said, again, when I say I haven't read the book, it's not dismissive. I do have a copy of it, but I said I'm not reading it until after the election because I need to keep it in a positive space. I really want to be re-elected. I really love being a TD. There's days where I'm maddeningly frustrated by the role, or you want to tell someone to do one because they're giving you a stick and you get lost. And then there's times you go like, geez, I need to get my head out of my own ass. Like at the end of the day, the last thing, and it's a bit tough now with the election campaign at the moment, but generally, if I'm rocking into the house at 7, half 7 at night, my kids don't care. Nor should they care that someone said something mean about me in the newspaper. They want their dad. They want you to get down on the floor and colour in with them and put your phone away. And everyone gets it. Would you not get off your phone? And the problem is, for a politician, we're obsessed with communication. We're obsessed with being in touch.
You see your mindset there now, I'm very envious of, because I was in a public role with a rugby team where a result went against us, and all of a sudden I made the mistake of, like, the odd time flicking on Twitter, and some of the stuff I read was really hard for me in a very small, like, that's a tiny little space.
Yeah.
So to be in government and to have it coming from so many different angles, I don't know how you do it.
Like I went to the stage when I was kind of starting off in politics, and when I was maybe a councillor or a backbench TD, and social media was becoming more and more prevalent. Like I've gone from a place where I used to Google myself, like what a loser thing to do, but you do Google yourself.
I've done it before. I don't do it anymore.
No, God, cheapest no. And then
No.
you'd look for yourself on Twitter, particularly if I would have done an interview in the UK and it'd been about Brexit. Yeah, I used to always look up to see, well, what are they saying?
That's
and then,
hard.
And then I'd like retweet the nice things. But this is, I didn't really know what I was doing when it came to social media. I got dropped into Brexit media quite ignorant of what I was doing. Like I knew the subject matter, that wasn't an issue. I'd worked in the EU, fascinated in politics, British politics. I knew the issue, but all of a sudden, so I was a backbench senator dying to get, on a minister's shoulder for the news. So hopefully someone at home would go like, I saw you on the telly. And then I'm sitting, I remember taking a call from the Today Show in BBC, and it came off, and I said, I did Radio 4 Today Show. Said it to a friend, they go like, what? I said, yeah, the Today Show went really well, quite enjoyed it. Is it big? It's got 4 million listeners. And you're like, oh, right. I'm fairly sure you called Boris Johnson a gobshite on it. And you're, no, never, not that seriousness. But so the more you get at it, you learn how to try and switch off from social media. You can't ignore it. And the same with media. If I go out and do an interview, you have to watch it back. And people go like, I hate the sound of my own voice. I'd never watch an interview back. You have to, because this is your job. It's communications.
Yeah,
You're
you need to
doing
get better
the
at
work.
it. Your body language,
post-match analysis.
everything. Yeah.
You need to know, the amount of people to give out to go like, you look very angry on telly. Like, I have a resting bitch face. I know I do.
I do as well.
It's
terrible.
I'm squinting and I've got big eyebrows. It's not any
I wasn't going to
badness.
say anything.
Yeah.
I'm trying to have a nice friendly conversation.
Like I'm that stubborn middle-aged man who won't get his eyes tested.
Yeah,
That's probably why I have a resting bitch
Come here
face.
to me. Sorry, I don't want to rush you. And I'm conscious of your time, and I'm so grateful for it, because I know you're hardly getting any sleep, I'd say. You don't have to tell me what it is, but is there one mistake that you've made in a position recently or in your political career that you just simply love to go back and redo because of the experience?
There's dozens of little mistakes. You need to be like, it's okay to make a mistake. It's okay to make a mistake in politics. It's okay to make a mistake in life. It's how you react to a mistake. How do you learn from it? And how do you fix it if it's a big mistake? Everyone makes a mistake. But certainly there would have been times at all levels of politics that like an email will come in or a call come in and you don't get back to it. You don't get back to it quick enough, or you don't give it the attention. Like those are the ones that kind of keep you up. When you talk about the Sunday night fear, not even if you've had a drink or anything like that, but everyone, the Sunday night scaries, you go back into work, and politics is kind of a 7 days a week job. So there's plenty of times like, I haven't got back to Mary in Dundrum. Is it too late to get back to her? It's 2 weeks now. And you dread, you get back to her and they go like, it's too late now. Sure, it's gone now. What can you do? And it's not that they felt that you've let them down, which you obviously have, but they feel the system's let them down. And so you bear that weight of responsibility that you need people to believe in politics. You need people
that's
to believe
happening,
in the system.
In fairness now, that's happening all across politics at the moment. And again, I don't know whether it's because there's such a greater demand, there's an overpopulation, but it seems like people are asking government, and probably because you're busy, there's lots going on, it's hard to get back to everybody and let them know that you're there with them and you want to help them out. And they feel that's not there.
The world's changed. Like I remember when I started working for Gay Mitchell in Brussels, I remember drafting a reply to an email, and I wrote, sorry for this delay. And he said, what delay? It only came in 3 days ago. A delay is over in a week. Because he was still very much, when he became a TD in 1981, it was letters typed up by the typing pool. And no one got a letter back before a week. You didn't get phone calls from your TD because he would have spent a lot of his early career trying to get phones put in houses. Like that's the way
mobile
it worked.
phones are like for you now. You can be contacted all the time.
People send an email. I was like, sent you an email yesterday, you haven't got back to you. And then there's other things like, some go like, I sent you a message there on Twitter, or I sent you a message there on Instagram, and you didn't get back to me. And you go like, I have them filtered out to Billio, because half the messages I'm getting are people saying not nice things. Like if you want to get in touch with a politician, you send an email to their office and you will get a reply.
Okay. What would be a good return of a reply where you're thinking, okay, that's acceptable? Is it a week?
Yeah, and over a week you get a little bit nervy, but people would go like, no, it's an instant time. They want to reply straight away, but someone will get in touch with me about an issue, and go like, right, I've read your issue, I need to understand it, maybe I need to ring you to get a bit more information. And bear in mind, like, we all have staff who work with us who are amazing, who don't put themselves up for election, but they make the world tick. So you have to understand their issue, and then, right, well, I need to make some inquiries about this. So I need to ring a couple of officials, maybe I need to send a few emails, maybe I need to look up the Constitution, maybe I need to look up the laws, maybe I need to ask a colleague, because this is a case, like the first time you do, appeal for someone on social protection, it's quite hard. But once you do it once, you get better at it, and you can see, but then there's some really complicated cases. And then you go like, okay, by the time you get everything together and you've made a representation on behalf of someone, which is kind of advocating on their behalf, which is base level. Every TD does about it. It's not about influence or graft. It's what you're there to do, to help people encounter the system. You might have an update with them in a week, but you probably won't have the problem solved, because you can't get everything solved instantly. Now, there's sometimes you get lucky, or it's just something that someone thinks is the biggest issue in the world, but you've done it a million times, and you're like, actually, that's quite straightforward. You're filling in the wrong form. And like, bear in mind, like, I remember when I started, you'd have people arrive to office hours in Dunleer Down with a form, and like, you'd have to fill it out for them because they weren't literate enough to fill it out. And that used to be a big job for politicians. Their clinics or surgeries would come in the UK, can you help me fill in this form because I can't read or write particularly well. That's still an issue, particularly in areas of huge social deprivation. And the forms are intimidating, and technology makes things very easy, but like, you talk to people and they don't have a mobile phone. Now, that's more or less gone now. Yeah. But certainly my first council meetings in 2009, most of the councillors had a paper pack for the agenda, and this runs to 200-300 pages. And I was not the first one, I didn't make a stand, but there was about 10 of us who came in and they said, well, would you like it in PDF form or a printout? And I was like, PDF? I don't want to be carrying around 300 pages. But that was how my political career started.
That's only 14 years ago, and like, so 15 years ago.
There was no, when I started, like, my first political campaign, I had a Bebo page. Like, no one was on, no one checked out who's your top 16, your favourite politicians?
I have a few questions because I'm really keen on our time. I think the first question would be, if you're a young person in Ireland now who feels maybe a little bit disillusioned by the country, where it's going, the lack of affordable housing, jobs, they're beginning to, as we've seen, emigrate and go to other parts of the world. We've seen Australia, we've seen America. If you were to give those people a message now that would reaffirm that you're in a position to care for them, you're doing your best to try and improve their future, what message would you give?
Ireland is a really, really good place to live. And often when we leave Ireland and we live somewhere else, we realise just how good it was. We know we've challenges. No country's perfect. We know we've difficulties. But we have a system whereby we actually believe in our young people. We have an opportunity now. Everyone who wants a job in Ireland can have a job. Probably for the first time in our history, bar a brief period during the Celtic Tiger, you can leave school or college now and walk into a really good job. You don't need to emigrate to get the good job anymore. That opportunity is there. We also have the resources, financial, to make the country even better. We've saved it up. It's not boom and bust. So we are building the homes. We do. It
is come down to, like, so you're right about jobs, but there's no point in me earning €80,000 if I can't get a mortgage. No. So it's all relative. That's the thing. That I totally agree with you that we've seen an increase in tech companies coming in, pharmaceutical companies in. Like, there's lots of jobs, but unfortunately, what's a job if you can't put a roof over your kids?
You can't put a roof over your
family's
head.
head.
You can't live your life. You can't enjoy it.
You talked earlier on about the housing issue, and I get that. But short term, what could we say to the young population? Say, look, I understand it's tough now, but this is what we have in place. Or is there anything you can combine the two, jobs and work, to kind of?
Totally, yeah. Like, I think it's like it would be a really cold place for young people if we said, there's no problems here. People have always had to save, just deal with it. It would be a really cold and wrong place to be. But the main thing is, you can look someone in the whites of their eyes and go like, I appreciate that you're frustrated, and you're right to be. And we recognise your righteous indignation, but we're not dismissing it for an instance, but we're working bloody hard to fix it. And we want to fix it. Now, you mightn't trust us, you mightn't think we're doing a good enough job, you might have given up on us, and that's fine. You can make your choices politically, but do make sure you have a choice. But the degree, and I said I go back to it, I see every politician wants to solve this, want to do it in different ways. And I get very heartened by the people I work alongside, the non-elected people, the political staff or the civil servants, when you see them putting in monster days because they want better for our country. And that is a shared goal. And I think, if we didn't acknowledge there was problems, I'd say, hands up, fair enough. If people are saying we don't care about your problems and we're not doing anything about it, you're right to criticise us.
Yeah.
But we do care, and we are working to make everything better. And it's not just about housing. It's about school places. It's about provision for people who have autism. It's provision for people who have additional needs. It's about getting waiting lists down in hospitals. Everything, we put all the focus on. Some things are going in the right direction. Other places aren't. But we are absolutely committed to cracking it. And the difference, I will say, about previous times of prosperity, and we've had very brief periods of prosperity, really, in our country. Maybe the Celtic Tiger was a bit wild, but got out of control. I'm very young during most of it, but look, I still have searing images of Lily's Bordello in 2002.
Oh yeah, it's crazy.
It
crazy
kind of
times.
epitomised it. You don't have that now. Then you look at the 70s before the late 60s, 70s, because as I said, history is what motivates me. You had a brief period before the international oil crash. We actually have an opportunity now where we can build for the future, that we don't go back to the boom and bust cycle, that you get a brief respite.
And I'm worried about my kids growing up. I'm worried about their future. I'm sure you're the same.
Sure.
I
know, I'm hopeful for my kids' future.
I don't know.
I really am. I think they have
know.
opportunities that you and I just didn't have 30 years ago. I think beyond the noise, the world in many ways, and you're going to think I'm mad to think about it, but maybe it's the history coming back to me, the world is a heck of a lot better place now than it was before.
Would you put that down to technology?
Technology.
The ability to get around quicker?
People are more aware of the world. You don't have the level of... I bear in mind, my parents were born in the last days of the Second World War. They were alive when people were discovering what the Holocaust was.
Yeah, crazy.
There's awful things happening in the world, don't get me wrong, but the Ireland that my parents grew up in was rank poverty, real poverty. We're talking about, 60 years ago, no one had a shower standing up. The world is getting better. The average lifespan was in your 50s.
Inside toilets as well.
Inside, I know that sounds really base, and I'm not trying to trivialise the challenges and frustrations people have, but I think when you see, I have two women at camps for me at the moment, and they're in their early 80s, and they're fit as fiddles, completely lucid, and they go but 30 years ago you heard someone in your 80s, you'd assume they were in a nursing home. Of course, there's still people in their 80s and 70s now in nursing homes, but people are living better lives now and are more aware of what's going on in the world. We're more open to the world. We know what's out there. That's why I have really big hope, and I think there is a lot more goodness in people now than probably ever before in history, believe it or not.
The US election, I'm sure you pay close attention to it.
Not as much as I should have.
I just found it really interesting, maybe it's because I lived in America and back in Ireland. I've been there for Donald Trump's first term of office. There's been lots of speculation since he won as to the direction the earth is going to go around global economics. And I know that the stock exchange is so important to him, and he wants to see the dollar gain strength. And you're reading about tariffs that he wants to implement, and Ireland and America have always seemed to have closer ties than other European countries. First, has there been any talks with the US about these tariffs coming in? And two is, can you see Ireland getting some form of a break because of their relationship with USA?
There's been no formal talks yet. It's been very much courtesy calls, President Trump hasn't taken office yet. That won't happen until
January.
The 20th of January.
Yeah, January.
There's been cursory phone calls between him and the Taoiseach. They're very diplomatic, fairly polite, regardless. No, there won't be any special arrangement for Ireland when it comes to tariffs.
Would you worry about the tariffs, the structure of it?
Totally.
Is that not going to, you've got this great plan, it seems, again, you're trying to build for the future. We've got a surplus, which is terrific.
Yeah.
And you talk about having money there. We need to spend it. But you must be worried about, a simple budget. Like, is your deficit going to increase?
So there's a few things there. Tariffs is part of it. Global trade war. Tariffs aren't necessarily going to be directed to Ireland, but you would certainly see it if he decides to have a trade war with China, or if he decides to put tariff on European products, cars, would have a huge impact.
Going to, isn't
he? Well, he's going to try to. The area where Ireland really could get potentially hit is in terms of his desire, and he stated this in the last year of his first presidency, and it's on the front page of the Wall Street Journal this week, and his choice for Commerce Secretary is really worrying. It's very much a protectionist, nativist economic sort of school of thought. And he said, like, I want to get the pharmaceutical and the tech companies back from Ireland. He name-checked Ireland the last time. And he's going to go, like, I'm going to cut our corporation tax to get them back. So, yeah, that is worrying. That's a bigger challenge to us than tariffs, but they're both really, really worrying. Am I worried about it? Yeah. And I'll try and phrase this when I'm not be too party political. I would be less worried about it if the likes of myself and Pascal Donoghue are back in government, and this isn't me blowing it up, far from it, but just as a representative, because we've seen this before. Not just because we got through the first Trump presidency, but more pertinently with Brexit. That was the real concern. Like the height of the Brexit debates, I would have seen the projections. I would have looked at what a really bad Brexit the impact it would have had on Irish society. It could have been devastating. Like, we've got out of this extremely well. Still, no such thing as a good Brexit, but it could have been so much worse. And so you look at what Trump could impact on our future plans for economy. Yeah, we've loads of money, and you're right, we're spending money, but we're doing something that previous Irish governments, when I talk about the boom bust, never did. We're saving money. We've €15 billion in funds.
You can't say that out loud.
And of course you can say it out loud.
No, but people are going to say, well, spend it then. Like,
we need to roar that we have it. We have Ireland, the country that was known as the island behind an island, the sick man of Europe. We have a sovereign wealth fund. The only other European country with a real sovereign wealth fund is Norway. Now, this is the worry for me, is people think about elections and go like, well, a sovereign wealth fund isn't exactly sexy. How am I going to feel that? But the fact that we are able to invest, we have two funds, to be honest. One is going out to invest abroad to make money for Ireland. To not that we just have €15 billion in deposit, but they're making money.
Is the IDA linked then financially with the government on that, or are they just?
The funds are totally separate.
It's totally separate.
The funds are they were set up by under the Aegis Department of Finance, and they are two funds that go out and they invest to get a return for the country to build up that reserve.
And you'd have a forecast of projections of where you'd like to be at the end of every year.
Yeah, so we intend to grow it from 15 to 30 billion euro in 5 years. So double it. Now we're going to put more money in it to build it up and build it up.
So again, you have America now with the added strain of the tariffs, and obviously you also have a trade agreement between Canada and Europe, which can only affect Ireland. Like, if I was in your position, I'd be concerned about Irish farmers. I like. With
America, less so. Yeah, we do sell a lot of agri-food product to America, but I keep going back to Brexit, but 86% of our cheddar cheese went to the UK. Not a lot of countries eat cheddar cheese, but we were able to protect that industry. That's a big, important industry for us. Currency fluctuations took 10% value of our mushroom industry when Brexit happened. No joke. These are people who are, the people who work in mushroom farms don't earn a lot of money. So if 10% of the value goes off their crop, they're losing their job. That's dozens of families impacted. With America, what we sell to the US, a lot of it is pharmaceuticals. A lot of it is life sciences. And this is why, I am worried, and we need a good, competent government who know how to navigate these waters. But companies don't just set up in Ireland for tax. That's a complete red herring. Yeah, we have a competitive tax rate, absolutely.
Yeah, but it also breaks down borders to trade with Europe.
Yeah,
right?
and the EU is the world's largest economic bloc. It's more. The EU is worth more than America. It's more people. It's more valuable. There's a lot of commerce there. We also have. We're in the EU, part of the world's largest economic bloc. We have the most educated workforce in the European Union. We're the only English-speaking country in the European Union. We're a common law jurisdiction. America, Canada, England all have common law jurisdictions. That's really important. We're an open country. Like the amount of people, 26,000 people from other EU countries came to work in Ireland last year. Where are they working? They're working in the big tech companies. They're working in the life sciences companies because I think we've 10 of the top 10 main life sciences companies are in Ireland and 14 of the 15 main tech companies. And most of those bases they have there, they're employing thousands upon thousands of people, and they're serving the entire EMEA, European, Middle East, African region from Ireland. And they're not just doing that for tax purposes, sure. Maybe that's why they came here originally, and maybe that's part of the package, but they also, like Apple wouldn't employ 6,500 people in Cork if it was just for tax. You look at like 2 weeks ago, and this is where it's interesting, when I came into politics in 2009, the economy was just about to go over a cliff, huge anger. I remember you'd be begging for a jobs announcement for 20 new jobs, 25 new jobs. Microsoft at Leopardstown launched 500 new jobs 2 weeks ago, and no one raised an eyebrow. And these are engineering jobs. These are really good, the next level of technology.
I mean, that's great, but then again, to your point, you know, pharmaceutical companies being repatriated, you know, likes of Pfizer now are changing their entire global employment structure, which means that we had to let 200 go there, for example. So there's a bit of push and pull.
But if you look at, say, the tech industry, there was a wobble in the tech sector post-COVID, and there was mass layoffs, and most companies would have got rid of Meta, 10% of their global workforce, loads of other ones. The Irish bases got disproportionately less cut. So they lost 2%, 3%, because they're here for bigger reasons. We aren't a cheap labour destination, we're a high productivity. We have the most productive economy in Europe. These are things that when you go...
but like that's the hard thing for me to grasp, right? So you can be as productive as you want, but if your costs of production are going to be too high, well then you're going to have an issue where there's not enough money going into the budget that's going to be positive, or into like an Irish company.
We're productive, and the products that are being developed in Ireland, be they tech or pharmaceutical, are really important. They are literally life-saving, life-altering drugs that aren't being produced. The R&D isn't being done anywhere else, or they don't have the skills base to mass produce them. But that's happening in Ireland.
You're proud of that. I can see you're very proud of that.
And everyone should be proud of that. That's not a success of this government. It's a very clear policy that these are sectors. People will always need medicine. People will always need medical technologies. People always need technology. It's the new importance in our life. We'll always need email. We'll always need, believe it or not, social media going forward. I
think we're in the middle of the technological revolution. You know, I think we'll look back in 200 years as society and look at this as being our technical revolution. I'm going to ask you one final question, and I haven't even asked you about other things. And I'm so annoyed because I was really interested in this. I could, but you need to sleep. I load quite a lot of questions, so this might take you 5 minutes to answer. But I'm going to tell you now that you're going to be Taoiseach of Ireland tomorrow, and you have a blank slate. There's two things that I want from the question. Number one is, you can have anybody alive or dead to be your right-hand woman or man. Who would that be and why?
Irish person.
It can be anybody, anywhere, all over the world, alive or dead, that you know will come in and get done what you think you need to get done. That's the first part. And the second part is, what would be the first 3 areas that you would target to remedy in Ireland? Yeah,
so she's been a little bit tainted in hindsight, but I was a big fan of Angela Merkel, the former German Chancellor. I think she saw issues on the horizon and dealt with them, and was very open with how she did it. And she moved, she progressed, she evolved.
What would be her main targets as a politician, do you think?
When she came in, like she just...
Is it finance? Is it housing? Is it employment? Like, what were the things that
like hers was how you run the biggest country in Europe, and essentially she led the entire European Union morally. There was other people in leadership positions, but everyone in the room, when a tough decision had to be brokered, they turned to her. So she was able to get people around the table and get stuff done. She was able to get compromise. She was able to force other people to compromise. She probably kept Putin at bay for a long, long time, but equally probably then left.
Have you met Putin?
God, no. No, I'm sanctioned by Russia.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm on the red list of 54 Irish politicians. I don't know what it means. I can't go. I'm not going to go to Russia anytime soon anyway. But no, I've never.
How long has that been in place for?
I think I'm there about 3 years, 2.5 years.
Okay, that's a relatively new piece of document that means you can't have any connection with Russia.
Yeah, can't travel there. If I was to travel to Russia, they'd turn me away at the border.
Yeah.
I don't know if actually there's no, like loads of people are sanctioned. I don't see it as a big deal.
Do they know that you're a rugby player that could help the national side if they're looking for a prop?
I'm a really bad rugby player, so I don't think I'll help that.
What would be your 3 focus points?
Yeah, 3 focus ones. Like for Ireland at the moment, it's like, one, I'd love to be able to communicate the importance of investing in big level infrastructure. And
what is that, real quickly?
yeah, for me, biggest thing for us, biggest potential is, and this is not a glamorous one, it's offshore wind. It's the industrialization of our wind industry. And that's generally off the west coast. It's hard to do. You need a new harbour in Galway. You need to use absolutely cutting edge technology. This isn't a fantasy. They do it in Scotland, but they were able to use a lot of the infrastructure that was there for the oil industry. They do it in Portugal. We can generate energy through wind. We are an island. We are a windy place. We can put through real offshore wind generation that will ensure that we have no concerns for energy going forward. We're not reliant on importing gas.
So you'd be up for wind energy, because other people would think of nuclear energy and
like
nuclear more oil and gas. So
no, definitely like oil and gas are it's nonsensical to be pursuing oil and gas at this stage. Definitely oil, like it is. Fossil fuels like that are having a negative impact on our planet. Like you don't need to be a green to say that. There's no long-term future in that. There is a long-term future in harnessing wind. Nuclear, Ireland is probably too small for nuclear. And let's not be hypocrites. We import nuclear power from the UK and from France already. We import the electricity generated by nuclear. But Ireland's a very small island nation. Where would you put a nuclear power plant? How would you justify it?
So in your view, the wind energy that you would create would have a knock-on effect that would maybe lower the cost for Irish people.
It would provide security for businesses going forward, knowing that we would be able to generate our own sustainable, affordable level of energy, so we're not reliant on importing energy going forward. But we have the ability to not only generate enough energy for ourselves, but to export. We can export the energy generated by our offshore wind to France and through UK with the interconnector cables. It's so important. That would be the first big thing. It's that level of infrastructure. So energy is the first one. And with that comes the need to massively bring people along. We go back to our conversation about the metro, about transport infrastructure, about building schools and all that sort of infrastructure. So that's the second phase of infrastructure. An area that doesn't get any discussion in Ireland, and we barely touch on it. I'm not trying to open a hornet's nest, but I think we would really need to focus is actually on our security. We are really exposed. We're exposed to the world. It's a very changing world, hybrid, cyber, all these things. We have lots of off-sea cables. We need to have an ability to invest in our defence infrastructure in a way that we've never done before. We've always been able to hide behind the UK and the US in a lot of areas, or our membership of the European Union. But we seize this notion of neutrality that is noble, don't get me wrong, and once upon a time it made sense economically and otherwise, but it's not realistic in the modern world where you can't be completely ambivalent. You can't be just say like, oh no, we're neutral, no one's going to hurt us. Someone wants access to the data that we store.
Would that include? I haven't even touched on immigration because I'm sure everyone talks about it, and I've seen your views on that. But would you include a more rigorous entry into Ireland as part of that? Or does that worry you as part of the security that you're talking about?
No, like that doesn't worry me, to be honest. I think we have the structures in place. We just have to get them better resourced and working better. And I think they are moving in the right direction.
Okay.
No, where I'd like to
Would you have been happy with that a year ago versus now? Do you feel now that it's becoming tighter?
I think it's going in the right direction. Tighter is not necessarily a phrase I'd use, more efficient. Okay. I think we're seeing better turning around. We don't have people coming over and waiting 2.5 years for an asylum application to be processed anymore. That's not good for them, regardless of whether or not they're going to give them leave to remain or otherwise. It's not good for society either. But I'm thinking more, as I said, like it's the data that we store here for large tech companies. Data is hugely valuable. Do we have the resources being put in to secure that data?
Okay.
Do we have the resources being put in to secure our own national cyber infrastructure, do we literally have the resources in our own military that we can contribute meaningfully to protecting ourselves? Not that we're going to get attacked or anything like that, because that's like the days of a great invasion. That's not going to impact Ireland. But all of a sudden, someone could hack our systems and try and take all the medical records. Our HSE was hacked before, or our, what's going to happen if someone found a device that could, cut all the undershore cables that link Europe to America through Ireland? These are really serious things. What happens if our energy infrastructure goes down and we can't import energy from the UK or France, and all of a sudden we run out of gas or oil? Those things. That's the second big thing. So it's investing in infrastructure with a heavy influence on being able to generate our own energy. Secondly, it's investing in our defence and our security capabilities. It was a real thing. And the other one, I suppose, like those are the top two for me that I think. The first one, lots of people are talking about, and that's great. The second one, people talk about it, but very few people are willing. And this is why you'd need someone who could get people, bring them on side and see the importance of this, and not get bogged down in the ideological battle that, we need to look at our neutrality and our alliances, without someone just goes, you want to join NATO? It's nothing to do with the conversation. It's about how do we secure our vital assets, which is our data, which is our energy, which is that level of security. So those are the two main ones, I think. Yeah, like the third one, there's lots of different things. There's lots of areas that come under lots of different banners. But I think
let's put it a different way. Let's imagine a third one is the one that you're hearing most from the Irish people. You said it was social housing.
No, social housing. But I think we're in a plan. We're in a position. I actually think we're going in the right direction. That the progress is being made. I think the plan is there. It's being financed. We just need to convince people that it's going to work in an agreeable amount of time. One that is, it's a tricky one, and there's no quick fix. But it comes to sort of equity and equality in society. It's looking after the most vulnerable society. It tends to be people with disabilities. It tends to be people with additional needs, and there's the full range there. It could be people who have severe learning difficulties, people who maybe have conditions like Down syndrome or cerebral palsy, or indeed, people who are on the autistic spectrum. And I'm very blessed that I have two very healthy, happy children. That we don't have to, we don't have to fight for any services for them. But one thing that really hits at me, and it's when you call to a door, and dozens and dozens of them over the last week, and you're met with that exhausted parent, that really truly exhausted parent, and often you can see it has huge impact on a relationship, or it has huge impact, but they just feel like they're constantly having to fight. They're fighting to get their child assessed. They're fighting to get an appointment with a psychologist. They're fighting to get a place in a school, or the right school, or an appointment with a specialist or an occupational therapist. So this requires about 100 different actions. And you'd love to be able to have an Ireland in the next decade that no one has to be completely beaten down and autistic just to get very basic on a human level rights and services. Like, met a lad this evening, I know him well, wheelchair user, he's 25. He said to spend 2 years getting the PA. I know I worked really hard with him, but why did I have to work with him? And there's lots of different reasons. There's an element of bureaucracy that you'd love to cut through, but that alone isn't it.
Yeah, it's hard.
There's only so many people doing these jobs, and you can't just magic up 100 child and adolescent psychologists overnight. It's the same way you can't magic up 300,000 homes in a year. So that's something that'll be the biggest issue. Like, you're a rich country, things are going well, but it doesn't matter how rich you are. If you have, and again, it goes particularly with children, and children who become adults, that people who have to spend an inordinate amount of their times filling in forms, waiting for appointments, and at the same time, they're picking up an inordinate amount of stress, and it's tough for them.
Yeah.
You would do anything for your kids,
Yeah.
of course you would, and particularly if your child needs that little bit of extra attention, or indeed a lot more attention. But I just think at the moment, and I take huge responsibility for this as someone who works in the political system and is a government minister in a government party, life is just too tough for too many hidden people in society. And it's often when you're going around at the moment and you're knocking on doors or you're looking through windows, and that people, they just open up that door and you can just tell from the sense of it, I don't know if they have enough energy to absolutely lift me out of it now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And am I going to end up giving this person a hug or running from the door? It's the toss of a coin. But you also really want to knock on those doors.
Yeah, fair play.
Because there's the people you might be able to help. It turns out, did you not know about this payment, or have you not tried this number, or maybe I can put a bit of the weight of my office behind it just to give you a little bit of help. And this is going to sound really corny, but there is nothing better in politics than when someone says thanks for something that has made a tangible difference to their life. It's just made it that little bit easier, and you actually were able to play a little bit of a part in it. It's wrong sometimes that our system requires a public representative to get in and fight in someone's behalf, and you don't need to be in government to do this.
Yeah.
And it can be everything from, you got additional hours for my child, or you were able to point them in direction of someone to give an assessment, or the little old lady that you got the street light fixed and now I'm happy to walk outside after 4 o'clock in November.
Yeah, yeah.
Like that, you can talk, and we've talked a lot about the abuse you get in social media, or, you know, the hours or whatever, you're missing things, but like, there's nothing better than knowing that you've actually achieved something for it. And you can do it on the micro level so much, but that's the beauty of politics. You could do loads as a councillor, micro level, you can do more as a TD, but when you're a government minister, you know, you can, with a piece of legislation or a statutory instrument or a piece of finance, you could make a massive impact. Now, to the world, it mightn't look like an impact, but you go to a parent who gets, you helped me get 2 hours respite.
Yeah, I know, it's great.
Like that's, you can't bottle that.
I suppose, I hope your wife and kids are getting on okay during this like couple of months. It must be crazy. Are they doing okay?
Look, no, elections are horrible in family, to be honest. Politics, for all that, it is the most selfish job in the world. Like, on Saturday, I'll either be elected or not elected, and I'll get that elation. I get those phone calls and emails to say thanks from people who you help. My wife, my kids are too young to really know what's going on, but our dad's not around as much for a couple of weeks. But my wife was more or less abandoned for 3 weeks by me, to be quite frank, picking up all the pieces, work, kids, everything else, dealing with my irrational moods due to a bad opinion poll. My siblings get it even more. My brother, obviously, because he is a politician now in his own right, but my sisters and my mother-in-law, like my mother-in-law just loves reading the comments and responding to tweets and getting into the comments article, and they'll get really angry and they'll ring you up, I'm so sorry someone said that about you. I'm like, I didn't see it.
Yeah.
Like, I have the block button in overdrive. So that's why I say it's a selfish, like people put their lives on hold of you. There's so many times over the years that I know I've been a lousy husband and a lousy friend because, and this could happen in every, and like you go away for 5 weeks in camp when you're coaching and you know you're missing your mate's 40.
Oh no, I get it.
Know,
I get it. Yeah, I was like, you have to be selfish to be a professional coach. It's totally selfish.
And
it's terrible.
You get that in politics, that you do feel when you get the when you get the cool moments, like you get the glamorous things. You meet a prime minister, or you go into a palace somewhere. Like, I'm not going to take a selfie here and send it to my wife because I know I'm going to get a photo back of her hair covered in baked beans because the kids have thrown it across the table. Yeah. And I just know, like, I definitely see it with my sisters. They really take to heart when someone's mean about me, and they get upset about it.
Yeah, but you don't. You're well able. You're well able.
You do it every day. You're trained to it. Like it's in like any when you're working at something, or it's your job or it's your vocation. You're used to it. Like I look at my wife's a teacher, and I look at some of the things she sees in class. Go like, how do you do that? And she goes like, but this is what you do it for. But like, yeah. So I do feel perennial guilt being a politician. I've chosen this career I was running for my first election when I met my wife. She didn't choose.
She knew what she was getting into then.
Oh, I don't know. Like, she thought it was a novelty.
I'm going to let you go
Yeah.
home because it's,
Yeah.
here, it's nearly midnight.
They're all fast asleep now.
They're all
yeah,
fast asleep,
yeah.
but I know you're up early in the morning. I want to thank you so much for coming and taking your
thank
time out. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I
it
hope
was
so.
really good fun, and I want to wish you all the best this
Thank you.
week. He didn't even get to talk about, like, you know, how many votes you need and your constituency or any of that jazz. But unfortunately, the conversation rambled in an area that I really enjoyed.
Good.
So thank you so much.
Thank
all
you.
the best, and we'll chat to you soon.
Super.
Produced by the Melrose Future Company.